All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May California, Nevada Drought Early Warning System Drought and Climate Outlook Webinar. Thank you for those that have joined us previously and those that may be joining us for the first time. My name is Amanda Sheffield, and I'm the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NIDIS in California and Nevada. This webinar is co-hosted with the California Nevada Adaptation Program, a NOAA CAPRISA team. This bi-monthly webinar series is designed to provide the region with timely information on current drought status and associated impacts, as well as a preview of developing climatic events. Before we get started, please note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording and a brief summary will be available on drought.gov and on our YouTube channel later this week. We have a great set of speakers this week covering current conditions and outlooks, as well as a look into the wildland significant fire potential outlook. Before we get started, just a couple slides on NIDIS. Those that don't know us may be joining us for the first time, I just want to introduce NIDIS in case you're not familiar with our program or our partners. Our mission is to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. We work to improve our understanding of how and why drought affects society, the economy, the environment, and improve accessibility, dissemination, and the use of early warning information for drought risk management. We do this with working with our partners, including federal, tribal, state, local, and academic partners to make this information useful and available. One of the ways we do that is through webinars such as this, which fits under our drought early warning activities, which we break up by region. And these include activities under observation and monitoring, interdisciplinary research and applications, communication and outreach, prediction and forecasting, and planning and preparedness. Before I ever start, just a couple of things of note. If you're interested about NIDIS, you can go read our strategic plan, which is for 2022 to 2026, which has a primary set of goals. I don't think I've shared that in this webinar series before, but I want to make sure if you wanted to go ahead and read it and hear about what we're up to, just go ahead and go to drought.gov and find our strategic plan there. As well as you'll have a presentation on this later on, but in case you can't stay the whole time, I wanted to mention that in April last month, we did launch an expanded and improved state pages on drought.gov. These new state pages, which we co-developed in collaboration with NOAA, NCEI, and state partners, provide a one-stop shop for state drought information that decision makers, communicators, and concerned citizens can use to learn and communicate about drought in their state. This includes individual maps, statistics, and resources for all 50 states, as well as Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. And as I mentioned, you'll hear about this in more detail and specifically California and Nevada's pages later on. With that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I will pass control over to our first speaker. Our speakers today are Julie Klansky from CNAP, CW3, and Scripps, talking about the Drought and Climate Update and Outlook. And then we'll have a Great Basin Wildland Significant Fire Potential Outlook, as well as a Central and Southern California one. And then, as I mentioned, a presentation on the new state pages, specifically the California and Nevada pages. And with that, Julie, I'll pass control over to you.
Amanda, that's the wrong screen. How can I stop?
You want me to take it back? I can fix that.
No, I think I got it. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Great. You guys are seeing it, correct?
Not in like presentation mode. I still just see the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. As Amanda mentioned, I'm Julie Klansky. I'm part of the CNAP, which is a NOAA CAPRISA team, and work closely with NIDIS. And I'll be talking both about the current conditions and the update, and then as well as the outlook today. And so let's start with our current drought conditions. It's been such a change since the beginning of this water year, but here on the left, you can see California with 68% of the state with no drought, which is pretty remarkable considering where we started at the beginning of the year. And it's really in the far northern components in the southeast where there's any drought remaining Nevada, not quite as much, only about 33% of the state without any drought. And as you can see, the most D1 and D2 conditions are in the southern part of the state, and they haven't received nearly as much as precipitation, just along kind of the southeast region in California as well. But as I talked about, what a change this year has been. I think many people are aware, but this is the class changes that we've seen, class improvements, and throughout much of the Central Valley, or the Southern Central Valley, which are now dealing with some severe flooding, which I'll touch on later, has seen this 5-class improvement. Throughout much of the region, we're seeing about at least 3-class improvement, and some of the regions that are still experiencing drought, it's only a 1-class improvement. Just they haven't, a lot of that precipitation didn't make it as far inland in the southern reaches. So how did we get here? And that will be part of the first part, and then the current conditions, and then I'll talk about the outlook. And so this is an atmospheric river landfall map. Chad Hett, who's at the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, produces these. And from the beginning of the water year through the end of March, there were 31 atmospheric rivers that impacted California, and actually 38 along the full US West Coast, which is quite a lot. And the other thing about them, which is the number of strong and extreme atmospheric rivers that we've had this year. And so, and also the other important component with atmospheric rivers is the orientation. And so the orientation of the atmospheric rivers we had, as you can see, they intersected the topography, which helped produce a lot of precipitation. So this has been quite a year. We had that family of 9 ARs between the end of December and mid-January, and then in March we had several more as well. So what did that do for precipitation? And so this is percent of normal precipitation from the start of the water year. I made these from the Climate Toolbox. It's a great website where you can look at historical data, and you can look at a bunch of different variables for your region of interest. You can do counties and otherwise. So if you want to dig in more specifically to where you are, I would definitely suggest checking it out. But as I mentioned before, along the coastal areas and throughout the central region, inland, received quite a bit of precipitation this year, over 150%. And then what we saw in the Drought Monitor as well is, very much so in the southeastern part of our California, Nevada region, and then in the far northern part received less precipitation, though much of the area is still well above 100% of normal. In terms of temperature this year, it's been relatively cool, which is defying a kind of a general trend that we have seen in terms of temperature. And so much of it, between 1 and 3 degrees cooler from the 1991 to 2020 mean. Other parts even cooler than that, which is, like I said, it's really changing. It's a difference from the mean that we've seen. And then in particular, over the last 60 days, this spring, throughout much of the region is even cooler than that. So between 3 and 4 degrees. So it has been overall a pretty cool water year. And I thought this was a cool figure that Mike Denninger put together. And so in thinking of some of our really big years that we've had in the recent past, this is looking at how much snowfall, or how much of the precipitation came as snowfall. And so it's a relatively simple, it's not looking at the precipitation type, but snowfall days are if the temperature was below 0 degrees. And so the whiter, this blue to purple to white, are more of the days it was snow, whereas these warmer colors are less of the day it was snow. And so one of our big years throughout much of the region was this October 3 April of 1983, and you can see quite a bit of these blues, purples throughout the Sierras. But Nevada was relatively warm, and there was less snow there. For 2017, throughout much of the region, a lot less of these purple and white colors, and so a lot more warmer days, a lot more precipitation as rain rather than snow. And then this year, given how cool it was, we saw quite a bit of snow throughout the entire region, both in the Sierras and throughout Nevada. So this year was quite anomalous in terms of how much snow we got, especially given kind of the over the long-term temperature trends in our region. So what has that done for snowpack? So as of Saturday, Much of our region is still well above normal for this time of year. You can see, it's over 200% in the dots or snow-tail stations, and the shaded area are by region. So like I said, still there's a lot of snow out there, very, very high percent of the median. Oops, wrong way. But what we're starting to see, excuse me, is that we're starting to see some of the snow melt. And so this is a change in the snow water equivalent. And so how much water is in the snow over the last week. And these red dots are an indication that it's decreasing by 6 inches or more in that last week. So this indication that we are definitely in the melt season and we're starting to lose some of that snow. It's not true in every location, but throughout much of the region, that is true. This is just another way to look at it. This is for California, but dividing the Sierra Nevadas into north, central, and south, and overall throughout the state. And so the red line was the 82, 83 max. The average is the cyan color, and then here's this year. And this number here, the 112, is the percent of April 1st normal. And you can also see is the percent of normal for this time of year, which is shown. And so for all of the locations in California in terms of north, south, and central, we're well above normal for this time of year, 200 over 320, almost 450, and still above the April 1st average. And so just indicating again, but what you're seeing is this decrease. And so the snow melt, we're definitely into that season. And this is from the California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is looking at various different places where there are warnings from flooding. And this isn't from precipitation, but from that snow melt, because there is so much snow melt and the high flows associated with it. And so there are 9 places that are currently above flood stage throughout the California Nevada Forecast Center region, 8 that are monitor stage. And so just with this massive snowpack and the heating that we've been seeing, it is causing flooding in many areas. And this is another, this is from the Merced River, right outside of Yosemite, and you can see that we call this the diurnal cycle. And so the warming during the day and the cooling at night, and when the warming, you see the increase in the stage level, and then decrease in the evening. And for the Merced, it is forecasted to go above flood stage as of today. I got this last night. So what does this mean in terms of our reservoirs? Again, looking at, excuse me, north, central, and southern. Each of these figures starting in Northern California, so this blue is the long-term reservoir average from 2000 to 2015. The gray is the snowpack average. And so if we think about snowpack and reservoir storage throughout the state as a combination that work together in terms of water storage, and then the cyan color is the current reservoir storage, and then the current snowpack. And so we've seen, and this is in the Northern California, the Sacramento to Feather rivers, here Central Sierras from Yuba to Merced, and Southern Sierra, I'll get to this one in just a second, from the San Joaquin to Kern. And so we are starting to see some of the snow melt. There was a colder period which kind of leveled it off, and we're seeing as the snow melts and also the reservoirs increase. In the Central Sierras, we're seeing more of that decrease of the snowpack just as it's a little bit warmer there. Same similar kind of pause due to cooler temperatures. Some of the reservoirs, even with this decrease, you're not seeing the increase in part because they want to make sure they have enough space to capture the floodwaters. And this is particularly true in the San Joaquin to Kern Valley, Kern rivers. And here's just looking at the Tulare Basin, which I'll touch on next, just given with, as I mentioned, with that massive snowpack, where the Tulare Lake that's repaired. So there's a lot of concern about flooding. And this is just kind of for a reference, some other big years when there was a lot of snowpacks in 1983, 1969. And you can see how this year, based on this, was actually higher than those two values, hit it about here. And so we're really seeing this relatively quick melt and and as it compares to those other years. As I mentioned, within the Tulare Basin, there's a historic Tulare lake bed, which had been drained and was dry, and the last time it had really reappeared was during 1983. And so this was, I should put the date on, but as of end of March from NASA, like where there was flooding from all this water coming down from the southern Sierras into the historic Tulare lake bed. Turning to Nevada, here's looking at Lake Tahoe, same sort of figure. And so similarly, a massive snowpack in Lake Tahoe, whereas you can see, storage level is going above that long-term average from 1981 to 2010. Now I'm going to real quickly turn to looking at the Colorado River Basin. And so this is from Metropolitan Water District, the storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And so here you can see this increase this year recently in Lake Powell, and also Lake Mead storage increasing as well. And so this figure is similar to other ones, but is showing a lot of information. And I'll start to walk through it. So if you can, this cyan color is the normal for 20 reservoir, for 20 of the upstream reservoirs from Lake Powell. Here is the red line is what that storage in those reservoirs is. And then the red line is the snowpack in those in the upper Colorado that would feed into these 20 reservoirs. And then this green line is all of this plus the storage in Powell on top of it, just so we can see, like, when you combine these and you put in the storage in Powell plus the 20 reservoirs, where is that storage? And so there's a lot going on here. But what you can see is this kind of rather rapid melting of the snow. You see Powell increasing, these reservoirs increasing, and you can see it here as well. And so for the Colorado, this was also similar to California, a relatively wet year. There's quite a bit of snowpack, and now we're starting to see that runoff. The Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, their current forecast for into Lake Powell, the unrestricted flows, you can see is about 11,000 acre feet. And so here's the max probable and min probable. So this is, it's above the historical average. How far above is yet to be totally determined. I'm actually going to switch now and start talking about the forecast. As we are in the melt season, temperature forecasting is becoming increasingly important because it impacts how quickly that snow will melt and come into the reservoirs and into the streams. And so this is looking at 2-meter temperature. And here's a probability distribution of that temperature. It's in kind of right around where the Merced, upstream of Merced is. And you can see the range, and earlier this week will be warmer, and then it starts to cool off, and some of that uncertainty. What the big color plot here is showing is the probability of different temperatures. And so, for example, if we were to look at, let's say this 70 degrees, the probability of being above 70 degrees at this time is almost 100%. So a lot of probability above that. Whereas looking later in the week, the probability of being above 70 degrees is only about 20%. And so this just gives water managers and those watching that snowpack and what that means for flooding a sense of what some of those temperatures may be in those coming weeks and what that probability range is. I should mention this is from the US Ensemble Forecast System, the GEFS. And so looking more at the extended range for temperature this year, for June, they're saying the forecast is, kind of equal chances above or below. And so not really certain for our region if it will be warmer or cooler for June. The seasonal, so looking out beyond June throughout the entire summer, is leaning towards above normal temperatures throughout California and Nevada, with a little bit more certainty throughout Nevada of even more likely to be warmer, but not by much. They're pretty similar. And given this long time frame, I would say, pretty close to the same throughout our region. I didn't include, I looked at precipitation, the seasonal temperature, the seasonal prediction, and it was slightly above or below normal, but I didn't include it just because it is so far out, and there's not a lot of certainty in that forecast, and which is why I didn't include it here. In terms of stream flow, this is something that's provided by the California Nevada River Forecast Center. I think it looks at the accumulation of stream flow over multi-years, which I think is really nice. And I would say this is an accumulating point for the San Joaquin Valley. And you can see the pink is the accumulation to date based on observations, and the gray is the actual stream flow. And given with all the snowpack, the ranges and the potential stream flow coming down. And what I think this shows is also the how we're getting closer to that mean, though obviously with the concerns for flooding, it would have been nice if this would have been slowed down quite a bit. But just to show how extreme this year has been, especially for that San Joaquin region. To note the difference for Sacramento, who wasn't hit quite as hard this year, definitely we're seeing the improvements in the overall stream flow, and you can see the projections going out, or the forecast going out towards the end of this water year. And then the last thing I'll touch on before I wrap up is El Nino. There's been quite a bit of hype in the press about El Nino, and largely where that's coming from is the sea surface temperature, especially the warming that you see in the eastern tropical Pacific, which is an ENSO signal. And so this is from CPC from NOAA that looks at, it's in Celsius, but this growing temperature in particular in the eastern Pacific, but you can see it in the west as well. And this is looking at the various different ensemble members of the ENSO predictions. And so from April through December, through the end of the year, and all the different models that are looking at it. But with so I should say the ENSO threshold here is 0.5. And this maroon color is from, there's different ways to do this forecasting, and this maroon color is through statistical models. And so there's indication for ENSO, kind of a moderate ENSO, whereas the dynamical, which if you think about a computer model, is much, much higher and potential for a much stronger El Nino. So there's a disagreement between the two types of models, and then CPC is actually showing less of an ENSO. So there is some uncertainty still, but most of the models are suggesting some sort of El Nino conditions, and we are in an El Nino alert currently. Just as a reminder though, I think we often associate El Nino with wet, but that isn't always necessarily true. This is a graphic by Mike Dedinger, and this is actually just looking at the largest peak flows throughout water years 1915 through 2022. And what the size of the circle is showing is how large those peak flows were, historical peak flows to average peak flow. And also the color shading, which is really what I emphasize, is the La Niña versus El Nino. And we see the stronger signals along the coast and in Southern California, which peak flows are more associated with El Nino conditions, but especially throughout the northern parts of our region, that's not necessarily true. And this is just one example for here in Southern California. As you can see, during this El Nino phase, you're seeing more of the high flows in Southern California region. But once you get into the Sierras and more central to northern, it's not necessarily the same. And so just a reminder that just the seasonal prediction with El Nino still remains uncertain. And if anything, where there's the strongest connection, it would be in the southern portions of our region. And so, Amanda, I'm actually going to wrap up there so I can stop presenting and I think send it back to you. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Julie. I forgot to mention before we started, and I put this in the chat, but if you have questions, just enter them into the questions box on the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll get to all the questions after, or as many questions as we can after all the speakers. At this time, I'm going to pass over to our next speaker, who is Gina McGuire-Palma from the Great Basin Coordination Center. She's going to be presenting the Great Basin Wildland Significant Fire Potential Outlook. Thanks for being here, Gina.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So hopefully you can see my screen now, at least the presentation part.
Yes, and you look good to go.
Okay. So again, good morning, everyone. This will be focusing on just the Great Basin. So far, everything that's been presented has been super interesting and certainly plays into a lot of the things that I will show as well. But I will focus on just looking at the fire season, kind of looking at where we are in drought and what that means for us, especially related to fire here in the Great Basin. So over the last month, we've had generally warm and dry conditions overall, especially the warmth. We've seen definitely a strong ridge in place, so our temperatures have been well above normal. That has definitely been increasing the snowpack, as was already discussed. We've had some recent moisture that does not take into account on this map. Certainly yesterday, we've had daily thunderstorms at any time over the last several days to week across parts of the Great Basin at any one time. So that's giving us some additional moisture to work with, which also plays into certainly the flooding concerns, because the new moisture on top of the snow melt obviously is a big concern for us with respect to flooding. But as far as from the perspective of overall over the last month, we've seen very dry conditions well below normal, really across most of the Great Basin. There are some pockets near or just above normal, but generally on the drier side overall. Since the beginning of the water year back in October 1st, obviously we've seen well above normal precipitation that extends from California across much of central and eastern Nevada into Utah, the Arizona Strip, and even parts of central and southeast Idaho, which were kind of left out of much of the precipitation early in the winter and really have caught up somewhat in the last few months to bring their precipitation near or even just above normal. Certainly some drier spots have been parts of the Snake River Plain, southern Idaho, and then parts of southern Nevada. Haven't been as lucky as some of the rest of the Great Basin. So as was already mentioned, currently our snowpack's still well above normal. Obviously that is melting quickly with these warmer temperatures, and any precipitation we get on top of the snowpack. We had quite some nice storms here yesterday in western Nevada, a lot of hail, a lot of moisture. Rivers have really come up. Definitely, as you already saw, there are some spots that are showing some moderate or even greater flooding in western Nevada, and even over parts of Utah and even up north. There are some local spots that are still showing some flooding. So we will continue to see that trend, and that'll be our first, certainly our first concern before the fire season really gets going, is just getting through the snow melt and the flooding and things drying out first. So our drought conditions, you've already seen parts of California and Nevada presented. Our current drought on the left there certainly has changed quite a bit less drought in all of the Great Basin. And looking at the drought outlook on the right, taking us to the end of the summer, showing still improvements with drought removal likely over southern Nevada, parts of southern and central Utah, and then likely the rest of the area kind of remain unchanged, but obviously the change has already happened. So this, you've already seen how the drought categories have changed in the previous presentation. This is just showing a comparison for the end of April last year on the right, 2022, and then this current year on the left for 2023. Obviously, just the significant improvement really across all of anywhere from the Rockies westward has seen the biggest improvements. So for the Great Basin, for us, coming out of the extreme to exceptional drought or even severe drought that was really impacting the entire area, and now seeing either abnormally dry conditions or no drought, and still a few pockets of some moderate to severe drought left, but those again probably changing somewhat here in the coming months. Just a very big improvement, which really plays a big role in the fire season for the Great Basin. For one, we're looking at soil moisture and looking at fine fuel growth. Typically, when we come out of our extended drought years, which is what we've been in here the last 3 years or so, and now we're coming out of drought, our soil moistures are improved. We've had a lot of moisture, so it's really priming the soil for new fine fuel and cheatgrass growth. And that's huge for the Great Basin in the lower elevations, especially Nevada, but also for parts of Idaho and the lower terrain of Utah that really rely on grass growth for fire spread. So this year we're seeing it's green everywhere in Nevada. This is about as green as it gets. So it kind of looks like Ireland a little bit in spots. And we keep getting additional moisture, so that's going to keep adding to the moisture available in the soil for fuel growth. So we're expecting and already seeing quite a bit of fine fuel growth, and we expect that to continue for the next month, maybe prolong the green up process just with the current moisture that we've got moving through and what we expect here over the next few weeks. So that will kind of certainly delay our start to our real active fire season, because with that moisture and the extended green up, that's going to delay the curing process. So we're definitely looking at a shorter season, at least in the beginning, for our fire season going forward. So here's the precipitation over the next 7 days. So as I mentioned, we're still expecting quite a bit of precipitation at times, mostly in the form of thunderstorms, to move across the Great Basin, especially the northern half of the region. So really anywhere from central Utah, Nevada northward, things will remain on the quiet side. We have been getting a lot of lightning, so we are getting some initial attack fires. But as far as the potential for growth, just really low right now, just with one, the moisture associated with the thunderstorms, and then two, we're still in green up, so those fuel moistures are at their peak or at the certainly at the high side until we really start to dry out and that curing process begins. Our fire potential as a whole will be on the lower side. And it looks like this pattern will continue at least into the first half of June, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But again, that's just prolonging our start to the really dry fire season. So here's our predictive services outlook for temperature is the top row for the next 4 months, and precipitation is the bottom row. And you can see for May and June, again, still holding on to that wet signature, especially over the northern half of the Great Basin. Southern areas will be drying out, and they have not been seeing as much moisture at times than areas further north, and so that trend will likely continue. So we will see the drying trend in the south, but also that's, we're not seeing as much fine fuel growth in southern Nevada, a little bit more in southern Utah and the Arizona Strip, because they've certainly had quite a bit more moisture, not only in the winter, but really what they need for growing season is to see the precipitation in the monsoon season the year before, and they got both of that. So we'll be waiting for this pattern to really start to shift, but it may not be until closer to July and August that we really see things drying out. So again, for us, we're looking at that delay and start to our really active fire season and kind of shortening that period as a whole, going into really focusing on maybe the latter half of July and August. So this is the national outlook, but again, I'll focus on the Great Basin. For the next 2 months, we're still looking at below normal fire potential in our higher elevations of both northern and central Utah, and then also the southern areas of the Great Basin for the next 2 months. And that's mainly due to the snowpack still melting. Obviously, it'll keep our soil moistures high, our fuel moistures will remain high while things are still greening up or gradually going through that curing process. So that's our main, and then also the Sierra on the west side, which matches up to California starting in June and July, keeping that below normal with those higher elevations. We don't have below normal in May for that area of the Great Basin because we're not in fire season, so no potential in May is normal. So that's why we don't have any below normal right now, although obviously the snowpack is still there and will take some time to melt. The big question marks are when we get into July and August. We do have some above normal fire potential for northwest Nevada. Going into southern Idaho, these are areas that have not seen quite as much winter precipitation, which for us, as you saw in the previous presentation, with the amount of snow we saw this year that came in the form of that precipitation, we saw the snow on the ground in the valley locations for weeks at a time, even longer than that. We had months at a time in some areas that we always had snow on the ground. So what that did for our fuels, for anything that grew last year, was compact the fine fuels. So we did lose our carryover component. So we weren't coming into this season with any dried grass from last year in many areas. Again, some exceptions are southern Idaho and northwest Nevada that didn't see as much winter snowpack on the valley floors to compact those fine fuels quite as long as some areas further east and south. So those areas in the red for above normal do have some carryover component, which is dead and ready to burn already, obviously from last year. So once their new fine fuel growth continues and dries out this year, they'll have even more fuel loading. So those are some of our target areas. I will say there's still some big question marks going into especially August. That above normal certainly could expand further south and east, depending on how much grass we do see grow here in the next month. And then when that dries out, those will be our biggest concerns, will be the lower elevation areas where fine fuels and cheatgrass will be the dominant driver of fire danger and fire potential. So again, our higher elevations still not a big concern this year. Even once they dry out, fuel moistures might not be low enough for long enough to really be a huge concern, especially if we get any thunderstorms with some moisture. So that's the outlook for the Great Basin. Unless there are any questions, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Gina. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Matt Shamison to do similar presentations for the Central and Southern California wildland significant fire potential outlook. He's with the Southern California Coordination Center. Oops, 1 second here. Sorry, Matt. There we go.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yep, you look good to go.
Great. Yeah, so I'm going to share what the two previous presenters shared. Pretty much have the same information here. I'm going to examine current and recent weather conditions first, then examine current and recent fuel conditions, both our dead and live fuels. And finally, have an upcoming forecast, weather conditions, and for the fire season. So as you've already seen, this is the percent of normal precipitation since October 1st, which is the start of the water year, goes to a couple of days ago. Over Central and Southern California, we're mostly in the purple, which is between 150 and 200% of normal. The wettest areas are over the far northern parts of the northern deserts and the eastern Sierra, where we have over 200% of normal. And for the southern part of the northern deserts, as well as the upper deserts in central Mojave, looking at the dark green and blues, 110 to 150% normal. And most of Northern California also has that. The only place that missed out on the precipitation is the lower and eastern deserts, which receive between 25 and 70% of normal precipitation. And looking at our average maximum temperature departure for the same time, start of the water year, October 1st, most of California is in the green, which is 2 to 4 degrees below normal. Coolest areas were where we had the most precipitation over the far northern deserts and the eastern Sierra, where they're 4 to 8 degrees above normal. Just a couple areas of slightly above normal temperatures, western Siskiyou County, coastal areas of Mendocino County, and just a little bit isolated spot in southeastern San Luis Obispo County and western Imperial County. And looking at our snowpack for the year, the black numbers on the left are average percent compared to April 1st. That's the normally when we see our maximum snowfall. So we're still above our maximum snowfall at this time, 100% up north to about 200% over the southern Sierra. And our current snowpack is between 250% up north to about 450% down south. So as was mentioned, the snow is starting to melt because April 1st, we were 200 to 300% of normal. So we've cut about half of our snowpack has melted, but still well above normal. And looking at our current drought monitor, as has been shown, most of the state has no drought. And that's a big change from what we saw in December, where we had severe to exceptional drought over most of the state. Usually it takes 2 to 3 years to get out of drought, but this year we had so much precipitation that we got out of the drought in 3 months. The only places that have drought, they're abnormally dry and moderate drought, is inland areas near the Oregon border and over our deserts. Now we're going to be looking at our fuel conditions. This is 1,000-hour dead fuels. So this is for Central California. You can see most of these started off well above normal. Since we had normal to well above normal precipitation each month, October through March. But you see there's this big downhill area in February, early March. That's because we had very little precipitation from the third week of January through the third week of February. But even though there was that 5-week dry period, January came out well above normal and February near normal because there was a lot of precipitation those first 2 weeks of January and the last week of February. Then you can see our large dead fuels increase again in March. We had all those atmospheric rivers coming in last week of February throughout all of March. March was our wettest month. And then April, well below normal precipitation. That caused our large fuels to drop off. And then in May, the first week of May, we had a lot of rain. So we're going to end up well above normal precipitation for much of the area in May, just through that first week. Then after the first week, it was dry. So we have this drop off in our dead fuel moistures here at the end. But expect it to go up in about a week. We had a big monsoon push here, which is very unusual. This is the first time I've seen the monsoon start in May, even though it looks like it's going to be brief. And last year was also exceptional. I've never seen the monsoon go into October, and it went through all the way through October 16th. So this is for Southern California, pretty much shows the same thing. We had high fuel moistures, which is the blue line, average is the gray line, minimum is the red line. Dropped off end of February and early March, and then picked up in March due to all that rain again, then dropped off, a little bump up in early May, and then a drop off toward the end here. Looking at our 100-hour dead fuel moisture, it's about the same. It has more variability because it takes into effect temperature and humidity. The 1,000-hour dead fuel moisture mostly takes into effect rainfall. So it has the same, shows the same thing, high starting off, then a big drop off due to the dry conditions end of January and early February. Then a big uptick again in March due to all that rain, then it drop off in April, and that big uptick first week of May, and then a drop off toward the end here. And shows the same thing for Southern California. And looking at our live fuel moisture, I'm showing you the Los Padres National Forest. The yellow line is the 5-year line average. The orange line is the 10-year average. So you can see over the past 5 years, we've been drier than normal in the winter, early spring months. And then we've been wetter than normal from late spring through the summertime, and about the same in the late summer and during the fall months. The green line is the current year, and it's showing above normal. We're above normal on all our live fuels across the region. You can see that 5-week period of dry weather caused our live fuel moisture to pause going up. Then in March, when we started seeing all that rain again, it started ticking up again. So now I'm going to talk about the upcoming fire season, upcoming weather. So this is normal fire activity for the region. This is based off of our 2009 fires. So going back to 2009, we normally see 62 significant 2009 fires with acreage of just over 308,000 acres. Usually during very dry and very wet years, we have well below normal fire activity. Last year was a very dry year. We ended up with 28 fires for a total of 78,500 acres. This year, probably going to end up below 100,000 acres again, which is pretty rare. And to forecast the upcoming weather, we look at our sea surface temperatures. This is our anomalies. You can see off the west coast, we have well below normal sea surface temperatures. So with that, we usually have troughing, and as you saw, we had below normal temperatures all the way from October through May. Each month has had pretty well below normal temperatures, and expect that to continue and the trough to stay in place. Even though we did have a ridge this past week with the monsoon, that's going to be going away next couple of days and going to be under a fairly deep trough for this time of year, going, looks like, for the next couple of weeks. So we're looking for a deeper marine layer than normal with the troughing in place, and expect near to a little above normal precipitation. Normally, we don't see much precipitation for May, June, July during the summer months. It's mostly monsoon driven for July, August, and September. The next area that we look at is in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of California. That's where we get most of our weather from during the summer months. And you can see it's above normal, so going to have more moisture to work with. So expecting the monsoon, when it comes in, to bring normal to above normal shower and thunderstorm activity. But as I mentioned before, our current monsoon is going to be ending here in a couple of days, and not expected it to come back until later on in July. It's going to take, computer models show that these sea surface temperatures off the west coast will warm starting in July and going into August. They'll warm to near to slightly below normal. So our monsoon season will most likely start later than normal, mid to late July. Normally it starts last week of June, first week of July. And then last place we look at is over the equatorial Pacific, and it's showing well above normal sea surface temperatures. So we'll be looking at a El Nino condition going into this fall and winter most likely. And looking at the left graphic, last couple of years we've been in a La Niña condition. We started getting out of it in December here. We started seeing the sea surface temperatures warm. They leveled off to a normal, which is between minus 0.5 and plus 0.5 by the middle of December. And then we started getting into El Nino conditions middle of March, and we're in El Nino conditions now. You need 6 months in a row of above 0.5 to get to El Nino, to say it's a real El Nino. So it'll most likely reach that by September. And here on the right-hand side, you see during El Ninos, the storm track mostly goes over the southern tier states. It's cool and wetter there. And over the northern tier states, it's warmer and drier. During La Nina conditions, the storm track goes over the northern tier states, so it's cool and wet up there, and warm and dry over the southern tier states. And you've seen this graphic before. In March, when this was taken, it was showing near normal. Basically, that's what the graphic I just showed you. And right now we're about 1 degree above normal as of May. So it's the stronger model here is basically where we're at. It started to level off according to the current sea surface temperature anomaly that I just showed you. So thinking we're going to be in a strong El Nino, you can see all these models show above 0, and almost all of them are above 0.5, which is considered El Nino condition. And looking at our upcoming season, we have below normal for the lower elevations in May, and then below normal over all our area except for the San Joaquin Valley and deserts. San Joaquin Valley doesn't receive usually any large fires because it's irrigated, and our deserts normally don't see any large fire activity as well. Then starting in July, below normal over the higher elevations, and we go near normal for the lower elevations as our dead fuel moisture cures out. Right now, our fine fuels are about 50% cured, 50% of it is still green. So it's going to take till at least the middle of June before we start seeing large fire activity for our grasses. So I think most of our fires this summer and fall will be over the lower elevations, just due to the heavy fine fuel conditions, and not expecting many mountain fires due to the well above normal snowpack. And as that snowpack melts, it's going to keep our soil moisture high. And so here's my final thoughts. Near to above normal rainfall and below normal temperatures into July, just due to that well below normal sea surface temperatures off the west coast. That'll keep troughing in place. The marine layer over the coastal areas will be deeper than normal into July. The monsoon will start later than normal, but once it starts, expect near to above normal shower and thunderstorm activity. Temperatures will warm to near normal late July through September, as computer models expect sea surface temperatures to warm off the west coast. Near to below normal large fire activity across the lower elevations due to deep marine layer and below normal temperatures well into the summer, even with heavy fine fuel loading. Well below normal large fire activity over the mountains due to well above normal snowpack, and then near to above normal monsoon late summer. Still too early to know how the Santa Ana season for next fall will shape out, but there will likely be early rains due to the moderate to strong El Nino. So last couple of years, we didn't see any Santa Ana wildfires, and not expecting one for this fall as well. And that's the end of my presentation, so I'll give it back to you.
Great, thanks, Matt. I'm going to pass it over to our final talk, Kelsey Satellino, on the new drought.gov state pages.
Thanks, Amanda. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So as Amanda said and had mentioned earlier, my name is Kelsey Satellino. I'm the Digital Communications Coordinator with NIDIS. And today I want to give you a brief demo of the updated and expanded state pages on drought.gov. So NIDIS worked with a team at NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information in Asheville, as well as state partners, to update and expand the state pages on the US Drought Portal. And we launched these new and expanded pages just a few weeks ago on April 26th. The goal of these state pages is to provide a one-stop shop for reliable state drought information that decision makers, communicators, and the media and concerned citizens can use to learn and communicate about drought in their state. And to help direct these users toward reliable drought resources from state government agencies and drought task forces, state climate offices, and other local and regional resources. So to start the tour, I'm just giving you a very quick view of the Nevada state page. To access the state pages on drought.gov, visit the by location section of drought.gov. And this is where you can view data, maps, and other resources by geographic scale from the city and county level to across the globe. Either click the state link under Browse by Scale, or select a state from the drop-down menu. Each of these state pages starts with some high-level statistics to help tell the story of drought in that region. For example, precipitation statistics from NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information, as well as USDA disaster designations. You can click the Learn More About These Stats link to learn more about the sources of the data, the update frequency, and the valid date for each of these statistics. This is followed by some high-level interactive maps showing current drought conditions, including the US Drought Monitor. And the maps on these pages are all interactive. You can zoom in or out on a particular region of interest, or click any county within your state and click that link to view the county page on drought.gov with additional data, maps, and resources down to the county level. You can also jump to the county level by clicking this View County Maps button at the bottom of the map and select from a drop-down. In addition to this interactivity, each of the maps on drought.gov and on the state pages contains a Learn More link at the bottom right corner of the map. Clicking this will take you to a data catalog page for that specific map product with additional background information, access links, and documentation to learn more about the product that you're looking at. One of the new features of the updated state pages is this drought overview section. This overview section provides a summary of drought and its impacts in that region, in this case, California and Nevada, to provide context to the media, engage citizens, and others looking for drought information for their state. This is also a place where we are highlighting state drought resources, state drought dashboards, drought plans or water plans, hazard mitigation plans, state drought task forces, state climate offices, and other key resources. Through usability testing and surveys that we've conducted, it's become clear that a lot of people visit the drought.gov state pages looking for reliable local state information like drought declarations or water use restrictions and other local data. So we wanted to make sure that these new state pages highlighted these reliable sources at the state level from state government agencies. The other big update to the drought.gov state pages is the additional maps and data that we have on these pages. While the previous pages primarily focused on the US Drought Monitor, the new updated state pages now have interactive maps showing current conditions such as precipitation, temperature, stream flow, soil moisture, as well as outlooks and forecasts. In addition, these pages contain an interactive time series graph showing 3 different historical drought data sets side by side. I won't go into all the details here, just in the essence of time, but this map is interactive, so you can jump to a particular time period. So this is the US Drought Monitor, and zoom in on that area of the time series, or isolate a particular percentile category to view it in more detail. In addition, you can download this customized time series as an image, or download it as a CSV, XML, or JSON file. There's also a variety of other data and resources linked at the bottom of the page, including ways to stay up to date on drought information, such as these California and Nevada Drought and Climate Outlook webinars, state and regional resources, ways to submit local drought impacts, and resources on climate and drought. The one feature I do really want to hone in on in these last few minutes of the webinar today is the interactive map features. We really tried hard to take publicly available data from across the federal government and other sources and display it in a visual way that makes it easy to use for decision making and communications. So one of the updates to our new state pages is an update to our legends, which are now interactive. This is a map showing current stream flow information from the US Geological Survey, and you can hover over a particular legend item to view more information about the percentile categories that fall under that category. And each of these has a link to learn more via the USGS. In addition to zooming in and out and panning on any of these maps or jumping to the county level, as you can do on the maps above, you can click on this download map icon at the top left corner of any map on the state pages and any map on drought.gov. And this will open up a customizable map image that allows you to take national maps and view them at a local level, or in this case, state maps and view them at an even more local level. You can easily jump between different data sets that are on the same page. So these are all the maps on the California state page. So I can easily jump to 30-day percent of normal precipitation. You can zoom in or out and pan to different regions. You can show or hide a map description, adjust the transparency of the layer, and change the base map, among other features. In addition, you can also show or hide different border outlines for different geographic regions. The state pages have counties and state lines on by default, but you can also show or display areas for tribal land areas. And this is a feature that we've just added in the fall of last year. One other feature of this pop-up I want to add to you is that when you zoom in on a particular region, if you switch to another map on the page, it will preserve your zoom extent and location, making it easy to compare information jumping from one map or one time scale to another, zoomed in on a region of interest. Once you've found what you're looking for, you can click Save Map to download a high-quality PNG image of this map. This is a really quick overview of the resources and features available on the state pages, but I want to say that this is just the beginning for these pages. We really worked hard to develop these pages in collaboration with users of drought.gov, state partners, and others, and we're always looking for ways to continue to improve them. So if you do have feedback or questions or want additional information, please do reach out to us at drought.portal@noaa.gov. We would absolutely love to hear from you, and I can make sure that that email address is included in the webinar summary that we put out this week. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. I think since we're running a little close to time, there were only a couple questions, but I think I'll try to answer those offline through email for the folks that asked them. And so I think just at this point, I'll say thank you all for joining us today and to all our great speakers. It's a lot of information, and as Kelsey mentioned, we're going to have it in the summary, as well as the recording on drought.gov and the NICE YouTube channel. After this, if you have any remaining questions, feel free to email me. And our next webinar is scheduled for Monday, July 24th, because we hold these webinars every 2 months. Otherwise, feel free to contact me if you've got more information, and I'll follow up on the few questions we got since we're at time in the webinar. And say thanks, everyone, and have a great week.